Welcome to the Ian Bousfield Experience. I'm glad you're here. This series of podcasts are just things that come up in my mind when I'm thinking about playing, when I'm thinking about teaching, and general thoughts about music. There are some things here that I hope you'll find really useful. And don't forget, if you've got any comments or if there's anything you want to discuss further, go to ianbousfield.com. Hello, I speak to you from a beautiful and sunny Switzerland. As I look out of the window, I see no vapor trails in the sky. There's no traffic noise. I live in a quiet place anyway, but it reminds me of life when I was a kid. When I was a kid, if a car came down the road, we used to run out and see who was driving it. Times are a little different, aren't they? But this reminds us of what life used to be like. Okay, less of the whimsical sentimentality of a generously put middle-aged man. Distance learning, Skype lessons, online lessons, can they work? Well, I have to say that when the possibility of this looked like it was going to become more and more real, I said, yeah, of course. Hey guys, don't worry. We close down. My business stays open. We do the work online. You're not going to notice a difference. It's going to be fantastic. Does it work? No, it doesn't work, does it? Sign up here for your online lessons. You can. I don't care how good it is. Please don't write in and say. Oh, you should try this platform. I was involved quite a lot over the years with something called Internet 2, which the New World Symphony in Miami was pioneering. The wonderful people down there did a great job with that. And that's about as good as it gets. But you need cables as thick as your arm coming into your recording studio on your end and also on the receiver's end as well. So, for it to work. We don't have that. Now, you can hear if someone hits a note. You can hear largely if it's in tune. You can kind of tell whether it's in time and the rhythm's right, but you have to ask the people to repeat it because you're not sure whether there was a lag in the internet speed or whatever. So it's not totally satisfactory. But there are things out of this crisis that I personally feel I will be taking into my teaching in the future. This is not a podcast to say, we're doomed, this can never work. I'm saying this is how I'm finding it can work. Now, with my class, what I'm doing, and by the way, just for your information, even before this, if anyone contacted me and said, could I have a Skype lesson? The answer was no. If I don't know or didn't know who they were and didn't know they're playing extremely well. For several reasons. One of which is I compartmentalize my life into, home life, family, teaching, playing and conducting, and instrument design as well, and podcasts. So my teaching compartment is usually extremely full, and I have to be very careful to limit the amount of teaching that I do. And by the way, I do quite a bit. But it's to very carefully selected people where I feel I can really make a difference, where I really feel I can help them. That's the only reason to teach anyone, if you think you can help. And so that's the one reason. I don't like to overdo my teaching. Otherwise, I find I just don't teach very well. That's the one reason. The other reason is online. When I hear one of my students who's playing I know extremely well and whose personality I know really, really well, I can fill the gaps in. I can fill the spaces in between the words. I can work out what the look on the face means. I can hear in what their sound is like. I can fill the gaps in. And if I don't know the person's playing, that's impossible. So it means I can't really help them. So what are the positives of this? how can we make this work? Well, let me tell you what I'm doing with my class. I meet, in inverted commas, I meet my students twice a week, and that so face-to-face time online is reducing and will continue to reduce. The first week, I struggled to kind of like 50 minutes with each one, and I was utterly exhausted after 3 hours, because it's all kind of one-way instruction, and that's not the way that I think is effective teaching. Teaching is really an interaction, and with this barrier between us, it's so difficult to set that interaction up. So I meet with them, online twice a week and see how they're going. Some of my students are in isolation in a foreign country with no one around to talk to. And it's emotionally difficult for them. So poor buggers, they get to talk to me a couple of times a week. It must be desperate. But I try and sort of empathize and tell them what I'm doing. And I mean, I'm very fortunate where I live in that I walk straight out of my door into, I can see the Jura Mountains to the front, and there's the Alps at the back, and I walk straight out into something called the Gurbetal. So you can either run straight out, get on your bike straight out, or go for a walk straight out, and it's absolutely spectacular. I'm very, very fortunate. And at the moment in Switzerland, we are not forbidden from going out into nature. I think telling Swiss people they can't go for walks in the mountains would be a bit like denying the French their baguette, or the English their bacon sandwich. It's going to be, that would be a very, 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 very last step measure, I think, to say you can't go out walking in the country. And just on a slight aside, the Swiss people are taking this extremely seriously. There is no need. When the Swiss government says, Swiss people, please be careful, please take this responsibly, they do. So I'm very lucky I can go out, but some people are stuck in apartments. That I have to bear in mind. I feel the weight of responsibility to my students and their well-being, the whole time. And so I meet with them twice a week. How are you doing? What are you practicing? What's your daily regime? Don't let this be an opportunity to let things drop. We keep needing to work, because let's not forget, it's the human disposition to strive. The thought of reward without having worked for it is horrific. It's meaningless. We evolve to what we have become now by striving, by working. And if you stop, there's only one way, and that's backwards. You can't continue to move forwards. We have to, as human beings, strive. It's the human disposition to get up and work. So how do we maintain that? What do we do? What's your daily schedule? I was reminded of a wonderful story the other day of an artist who was asked, how do you find your inspiration? What inspires you to get out of bed and create this art? And she said, I keep hearing about this thing, this inspiration. I've never really understood that. I just get out of bed and work. And I'm kind of a little bit like that as well. And we are tested. This is a challenge of students right now. We are tested because without the input of the students, it's very difficult to move forwards. The teaching as a service industry is kind of on hold a little bit now, and I'm really loving the direct input that my students have to put into their education, and some of them are absolutely knocking it out of the park. I'm so impressed with what they're doing. So we meet twice a week. What are you practicing? What are you working on? How are you feeling? Are you arguing with your mom yet? All of this kind of thing. What are you working on? Let's look. Okay, practice this, do this, da. I'm having trouble with this technical issue, this one. Okay, think about this. But that is actually becoming the smallest and least important part of the interaction that we have. What my students can do is they can record to a pretty decent quality. Most people have, a decent microphone, or, even on an iPhone, or even on a computer. As long as you position it, it's far better quality than anything you're going to get on the internet. And so I allow an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, 7 days a week, to listen to people's recordings. Now, and this is the bit that I'm going to take back into my teaching studio. I can imagine at the end of this, I'm going to have a video camera and a television screen up for instant replays to give real-time comments about what's happening. You see, many of you other teachers out there may already have been aware of this. We're all trying to learn, and I'm learning this. And that is that when a student plays something in a lesson, in a normal lesson, they're so busy operating the machinery that they can't really be aware of what they're doing. It's so much hands-on trying to man the equipment that they're not aware of everything that's happening. Now, what's happening now is they're sending me these recordings and I'm giving real-time, I play the recording in the background and I'm giving real-time comments and advice over the top of what they're doing. So they can then go and take that away and analyze and listen. Yeah, okay, I can hear I'm doing this, or I'm here, I'm doing this. Now, what I'd like you to do now is to listen to a couple of examples of this. One is, and I did this quite independently. What I try to do is I say to some students, okay, I want you to record it, and then I want you to give me your observations over the top of the recording of your playing. I will do the same, and then let's look and see how close we are. So you can hear, quite clearly here, my student.
The slide technique's kind of detracting from the sound here. There's some weird noise in the middle of the sound.
And now let's interestingly listen to the same passage with my independent. Remember, I hadn't heard his comments to this at all. I independently gave my assessment. Did you hear what happened at the end of that C flat? There's something physically happening. You're not staying up and on. So you're cutting it off. Listen. Something happens before you play the 16th. There again. Very good, well done. Very, very good indeed. So there we have a great example of the student identifying, he said something happens in the middle of the note, and he went on to say that more and more throughout the recording of the David. And this is a first-class student, as you can hear, even with the poor sound recording quality. And independently, I heard that as well and gave the technical input, even something as simple as just to keep saying to the end of the note. And that's how you can really quickly troubleshoot. And this is a part of the distance learning that I'm finding absolutely fantastic. And it's not just with this student, but several students are saying, I'm getting better so much faster. Because I work on this theory that the more they give, the more they get back. And I have students sending me 3 or 4 recordings a day, and they're getting 3 or 4 sets of feedback like that per day. And I am also seeing this really, I must say, faster than usual improvement, really quickly fixing things. So anyway, that's the real big advantage I'm seeing of this. But it relies, what we're talking about here is that the teaching goes on to a permanent accompaniment of a student through their daily practice routines. The third part of the of the online coaching that I'm doing is, I'll be honest, there was a guy on Facebook called Zach Kramer, who I don't know at all, but you get challenged to do these listening lists, like your top 10 albums or whatever. Well, this guy just keeps putting them out there. And I don't know who he is. I've written to him and said, don't know who you are, but you get it right. He's putting some fantastic recordings up. So I took a lot of the recordings that he had recommended and then added some of my own, and I'll continue so to do. And we have now, my class have a 48 album recording list. Historical, some of them going back to Heldenleben, 1927, New York Philharmonic. 1954, Death and Transfiguration, George Zell, Cleveland. 1960s, Philadelphia, Rachmaninoff 2, Ormandy. Oh my goodness me, what a recording. And so on and so on. And just on that subject, by the way, something occurred to me. When we talk about the great orchestras of the world, and this is now, please don't shoot me for having an opinion. I love music, and if I were to put my top 10 albums of all time, I bet you at least half of them would be of American orchestras, but most of the recordings before 1970. It strikes me, going back over these recordings, that Rachmaninoff 2 with Ormandy. Oh, it's about the closest recording I've ever heard where it sounds, if you want to know what it sounds like to sit in the middle of a great orchestra, get your headphones on and listen to that. The recording quality is just so real, even on a bloody YouTube version of it. And it's this sound and this style that, Berlin Philharmonic, Vienna Philharmonic, Philadelphia, Chicago, Cleveland, are they on the same level? Yes. On the basis of those recordings, stylistically, musically, technically, they stand shoulder to shoulder with anything that Berlin or Vienna would do now. Unfortunately, I no longer feel that's the case. And I am not saying that to criticize anyone. It's a statement of fact, in my opinion. A bit ambiguous, isn't it? I wish it were not the case. Things have become very homogenized. Everything's very similar. And I don't see much these days breaking that, the critics' top four of, Berlin, Vienna, Vienna, Berlin, whatever, those two to start with. And then they usually put Concertgebouw and London Symphony in there. And I guess that's kind of how it was. People ask me, they say, do you miss playing in orchestras? And, what I wouldn't give to travel back in time and play Rachmaninoff 2 with Ormandy in the Philadelphia back then. I don't know whether I'd like to go back in time and listen to George Zell or sit in an orchestra and play Death and Transfiguration with George Zell, because he was a bastard, but I think they were all terrified. So I don't know whether I'd be too grateful of the opportunity to do that. But anyway, I digress. So there's this massive listening list, and I instruct my students to listen for two ways. Firstly, we train the subconscious, and then we very directly train the conscious. So training the subconscious is you sit down, you put the headphones on, or you listen to it the best quality you can. You have silence, it's still. You're at peace. And you listen without comment, without judgment. You don't decide whether you like something, whether you don't like something. You listen to it. And unbeknown to you, or perhaps you're aware of it, your subconscious is working like crazy, digesting, taking in like a sponge everything that it hears. And when you have a trusted listening list like this, where someone who you trust has curated it for you, you can just sit back and just let it wash over you. And your subconscious is doing the work. You're training your fantasy, you're training your subconscious. When you play the trombone, that autopilot that you're training by doing that will transfer musically into what you're doing. Because let's not forget, when we play a musical instrument, it is the realization of our fantasy. It's not an external operating of a piece of machinery. And this is where I think a lot of people go wrong, is that they try to play the trombone the way they think they've been told to do it. And, once I get someone singing pretty well, stylistically, there's not much difference between the way a French person or an American person would sing The Ride of the Valkyries. Sounds quite shocking. But the voice is the window into the fantasy, into the imagination. Try to create what you have in your head. That's how we play, basically, isn't it? Try to make that become real. And we are training that. It's like having your emotion, your expressive archive. You're adding more books to your library every time you listen to something great. So that's the first way you listen. The second way that we listen is to directly train the conscious. And I'll use very clearly, I've made it compulsory for all of my students to listen to at least 5 Philip Jones Brass Ensemble albums. Because for me, it's still the highest integrity brass ensemble playing I've ever heard. That's different to saying whether it's my favourite brass ensemble. I kind of like no-till brass myself, but it's a different thing, isn't it? But Philip Jones Brass Ensemble, the integrity of articulation, sound, musicality, integrity. So if we look at that and focus in on the trombone playing, on most of them, the great John Iveson, and there I really want my students to turn back to being that 2.5-year-old kid. The kid learns to say mama, papa, and then why? Let's go for a walk. Why? Well, we're going for a walk. Why? Well, it's a beautiful day. Why? Because the sun's shining. Why? Get your coat on, we're going out. It's like, and I encourage my students, I encourage all of you, do you like the sound? Yes. Why? It's soft. What do you mean soft? Well, the texture. Well, what is the texture? Well, it's kind of like velvety, Really? What colour? Turquoise. Dark or light turquoise. You see what I mean? You're going, what is it that you like about it? What is it that you could take into your playing? Can you do that on your instrument? Can you make that sound? Can you play with that articulation? Can you play with that legato? Can you play with that sound concept? Can you play with that phrasing? And good Lord, there's a helicopter coming by. Wow, that's unusual. And so that's a very clear, obvious way in. When you listen to the Alpine Symphony, the Los Angeles Philharmonic with Zubin Mehta, where does it take you? What does it do to you? What feeling do you get? When you listen to George Zell, Cleveland, Mozart 40, can you feel the tension between the orchestra and the conductor? What does it do? What emotions does it bring out in you? What does it make you feel? And then how can you apply that next time you play something? So those are the 3 clearly defined aspects, the pillars of my teaching right now. And you can probably tell I'm loving it. I went through a couple of days of thinking, this can't work, to now thinking, this is brilliant. If we kind of mix up the one-to-one, really seeing each other in person in the future, mixed in with this, I think this is really the way to go. So when people ask you on social media, what benefits do you see from what we're experiencing at the moment? We can now say, well, as far as the online teaching is concerned, we are actually really fine-tuning it and working out how to do it and make it successful. Have fun out there. And remember, it is the human disposition to get out of bed in the morning and be motivated and to work. And what I love about this is I'm seeing my students stand up and say, I'm going in this direction with my playing, with my career, and this system is really helping. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. If there are any issues that you found particularly interesting, don't forget to contact me, and always go to ianbousfield.com for lots more interesting stuff.